In the quiet halls of London's National Gallery hangs a painting that has captivated viewers for nearly 6 centuries. It's small, just 82 by 60 centimetres, yet it contains layers of mystery so deep that art historians still debate its true meaning today. This is the Arnolfini Portrait, painted by Jan van Eyck in 1434, and it may be the most analysed painting in the history of art. At first glance, you see what appears to be a simple domestic scene. A wealthy couple stands in an ornate bedroom, their hands joined. The man raises his right hand as if taking an oath. Everything seems peaceful, almost mundane. But look closer, and you'll discover that virtually every object in this room, from the fruit on the windowsill to the dog at their feet, might be telling us a story that completely changes what we think we're seeing. Let's start with what we can say for certain. We're looking at Bruges in the 15th century, in what is now Belgium. This was one of the wealthiest trading cities in northern Europe, a place where Italian merchants came to make their fortunes in the cloth. The couple before us are dressed in garments that scream wealth and status. The woman wears a green gown with a train so long it pools on the floor. Art historians have calculated that the fur trim alone, grey squirrel fur, known as vair, would have required somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 pelts. In today's terms, this dress would cost a small fortune. The man's attire is equally impressive. He wears a dark velvet tabard trimmed with brown fur, likely marten or sable. These weren't just expensive materials, they were status symbols, markers of belonging to the merchant elite who controlled the economic life of the city. For centuries, everyone assumed this was straightforward, a marriage portrait. Wealthy people commissioned such works all the time. But then, in 1934, an art historian named Erwin Panofsky published a groundbreaking interpretation that would change everything. Panofsky argued that this wasn't just a portrait of a marriage, it was the marriage itself, captured in paint. The painting, he claimed, functioned as a legal document, a visual certificate of the ceremony. His evidence? Look at the back wall just above the mirror. There, in elaborate Gothic script, are the words Johannes de Eyck vo fui hic 1434. Jan van Eyck was here, 1434. Now artists signed their work all the time, but not like this. Van Eyck's signature appears on the wall as if it were painted there by someone standing in the room. It's integrated into the scene itself. Panofsky interpreted this as a witness statement. Van Eyck wasn't just the artist, he was present at this moment, legally validating what was happening. This brings us to the painting's most extraordinary detail, the convex mirror hanging on the back wall. It's tiny, only about 5 centimeters in diameter in the actual painting, yet Van Eyck rendered it with such precision that you can make out details that should be invisible at this scale. The mirror reflects the entire room from the opposite viewpoint. You can see the backs of the couple, the window with its coloured glass, the wooden ceiling beams, even the oranges on the windowsill, exotic luxuries in northern Europe at the time. But here's what made Panofsky's theory truly compelling. In the mirror's reflection, near the doorway, you can see 2 additional figures. One appears to wear blue, the other red. Panofsky suggested these were the witnesses to the ceremony, and that one of them might be Van Eyck himself, inserting his presence into the scene twice, once through the signature and once through the reflection. The mirror's frame is itself a masterwork. It's surrounded by 10 tiny medallions, each no bigger than a coin, depicting scenes from the Passion of Christ, from his arrest in the Garden of Gethsemane to his crucifixion. Scholars believe Van Eyck painted these using a brush of perhaps a single hair. This wasn't just showing off, though it certainly was that. It was imbuing the scene with religious gravity, suggesting that what we're witnessing happens under God's watchful eye. For decades, Panofsky's interpretation dominated. The couple was identified as Giovanni di Arrigo Arnolfini, an Italian merchant in Bruges, and his wife Giovanna Cenami. It all seemed to fit perfectly. But then came a problem. Archival research in the 1990s revealed something inconvenient. Giovanni di Arrigo Arnolfini didn't marry Giovanna Cenami until 1447, 6 years after Jan van Eyck died. The wedding theory, at least in its original form, collapsed. Scholars scrambled to find another candidate. The most likely is Giovanni di Niccolao Arnolfini, a cousin who was also a wealthy merchant in Bruges and who did live during Van Eyck's lifetime. And this is where the story takes a darker turn. Records show that Giovanni di Nicolao's first wife, Costanza Trenta, died in February 1433, just over a year before the date on the painting. All evidence suggests she died in childbirth, a tragically common fate for women in the 15th century. In 2003, art historian Margaret Coaster proposed a radical reinterpretation. This is not a wedding portrait at all. It's a memorial portrait, a tribute to a wife who died too young. Suddenly, details that seemed merely decorative take on profound significance. Look at the chandelier hanging from the ceiling. It holds 6 candles, but only one is lit, and it's positioned directly above the man's head. On the woman's side, there's evidence of another candle, but it has burned down and gone out. In the artistic tradition of memento mori, reminders of death, extinguished candles symbolize a life that has ended. Look at the carved wooden chair behind the woman. At the top of the finial post is a small figure of a woman standing on a dragon. This is likely Saint Margaret of Antioch, the patron saint of childbirth. According to legend, Margaret was swallowed by a dragon and miraculously emerged unharmed, a story that made her the saint that pregnant women prayed to for safe delivery. Which brings us to the central question that has sparked endless debate. Is the woman in this painting pregnant? Coaster insists she is, and that this explains everything: the invocation of Saint Margaret, the memorial nature of the portrait, the commemoration of a woman who died bringing new life into the world. Others are not convinced. They point out that the gathered, voluminous style of dress was simply the fashion among wealthy women of the time. You can see similar silhouettes in other Van Eyck paintings where pregnancy is clearly not implied, including his portraits of the Virgin Mary. Moreover, Giovanni Arnolfini was a cloth merchant. The extravagant display of expensive fabric in his wife's gown would have been a professional statement, an advertisement of his trade. Even the little dog at the couple's feet becomes ambiguous. Panofsky saw it as a symbol of marital fidelity. Dogs were commonly used this way in art. But in funerary tradition, dogs also appear as guardians, companions meant to accompany the deceased into the afterlife. The mirror itself might contain the most subtle clue. The 10 medallions depicting Christ's Passion aren't arranged randomly. On the left side are scenes of Christ alive, his arrest, his trial. On the right are scenes of his death, the crucifixion, the descent from the cross. It's as if the couple themselves are divided along this same axis, the man on the left, living, the woman on the right, remembered. So what are we really looking at? Is this a legal record of a marriage, as Panofsky believed? A memorial to a wife lost in childbirth, as Costa suggests? Or simply a double portrait of a wealthy couple, rich in symbolism, but not hiding any secret narrative? The truth is, we may never know for certain. And perhaps that's exactly what makes this painting so endlessly fascinating. Jan van Eyck was a master not just of technique but of ambiguity. He created a scene that feels utterly real, so real that you feel you could step through the frame into that room, yet every detail is charged with potential meaning. What we can say is this: Van Eyck revolutionized painting. He was among the first artists in Northern Europe to use oil paint in layers, building up colors and luminosity that made his subjects seem to glow from within. He painted textures, fur, velvet, brass, glass, so convincingly that they seemed tangible, and he understood that a painting could be more than a picture. It could be a puzzle, a document, a prayer, a memory. Nearly 600 years later, the Arnolfini Portrait still hasn't given up all its secrets, and maybe it never will.